Without a quorum present this evening, we'll be beginning a meeting of the Co-op Budget Committee and proceeding with agenda items that don't require board action until a fifth member of our committee is present. Our meeting to proceed as normal. Only as our fourth Thursday for the month of June, and our agenda was posted more than 24 hours in advance of this meeting. I'd like to introduce myself, Darlene Mann, and the members of the Budget Committee who are present this evening, which include Tom Whalen, Raoul Blanchet, and Tony Stanizzi. We're awaiting Brian Rader, who is hopefully walking in so that we can officially call to order. Great, now we're officially call to order.
How you doing?
Hi, Brian. And I would like to, the excused members for tonight's meeting are Matt McGuire, Steve Conant, and Dave Glenn. I would also like to thank Kelly Seeley, our business administrator, and Lance Finmore, our facilities director, who are in attendance this evening, and Co-op School Board Chair Holly Turlo Babcock, who is here for the missing school board member tonight, who is Cindy Van Conant, although she's not the identified alternate for the Budget Committee and won't be voting in any proceedings this evening. She will be here to give an update on various school board matters. That being said, again, apologies for starting a little bit late. We were just, as I was mentioning, Brian, we needed you for the quorum, so we were kind of like eagerly anticipating. So with that said, we'll move some of the administrative items to the end of the meeting since we're a little bit delayed, and proceed right into the facilities overview that I believe will be the first time given by our facilities director, even though you've been here with the district for a while. I guess we didn't want to put this on you from at the get-go.
Ease
so give you some time to ease into the district to the SAU, and we'll look forward to your overview.
Already on.
It's just for streaming, it's not here.
Thank you all for allowing me to come here. I have been here 2 years, and before I begin, I would like to thank the person that taught me here. So, my background was over at College of Music for 9 years. Safety, security, all different facets, facilities for those 9 years down there. Here on a whim because I wanted to be closer to home, and story, just a little side story. My wife said, "You know, you should prepare for that interview," and I said, "Nope, I'm not. I'm just going to go on and be myself." Out of your mind. I was just myself, and I'm here now. That I've done in the last 2 years is can be attributed back to one person or anybody else, and that is Kelly Seeley. She's been a tremendous mentor, and she took a shot on me. Try not to disappoint her, ever. That's impossible, because nobody's perfect. She doesn't expect perfection or anything like that. That is why I'm here, so thank you everybody. Thank you. Here to report on the facilities of the Hallsburg Public School District. Again, Kelly has, I don't know how she did everything she did. Crazy the amount of things she would have done. Very lucky to have her. So this report is through her years of hard work. So, what were the goals of this presentation? I want us to inform, discuss the status of the co-op facilities, Hallsburg Middle School, Hallsburg High School, and also discuss longer-term projects. Evaluation methodology, methods we use, again, I came up with a facility audit tool many years ago. And this is a tool that is utilized by everyone in the facilities department, which is building maintenance supervisors, myself, building principals, the superintendent, as well as, a lot of other members in the SAU. First graduate building supervisors who are on the ground every day, middle school and high school, so they know the buildings, I'd like to think they know the buildings better than I do, they're there every day. They're home. And then discuss with principals, I take a crack at it too, in case, again, nobody's perfect. I'd like to, not pet project, if there's something that I've seen that they haven't seen, I'll add it in there. It's seen by many people. One set of eyes. I'm not saying it's a good system that was implemented. Because from my past, this isn't how we budget. And it just, again, it reigns to how everyday operations just, I never. Well, I think everyone here, tool in general, it's just a spreadsheet where we do HVAC, electrical, plumbing, security. Condition quality of that system, sure, whatever it is, equipment in general, we place a number on that. Lower than 4 after that, we budget for it, and we throw it in the first round budget. That told me when I first started, there was nice to haves, there's need to haves. I come from the private sector, and it's always need to haves, and
I would say across the SAU, there's been a significant amount of projects, varying degrees of, implementation status, follow-up on projects, continuation projects in other districts and things like that. So there's
So
definitely a lot to manage.
So the scoring system is just an assignment of a number? Or you have a criteria with different parameters and weights for each one of them?
It's based on, criteria of, past experiences that they've dealt with, on a building level. It's been an issue that's been persisting for, months or, days or months, we like to include in that list.
I don't expect you to do it tonight, but would it be possible to get a little demonstration and a tour of the tool at some point? To
Absolutely.
understand the algorithms?
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that.
Okay,
Great idea.
I'd like to do that.
This is a facility audit tool. We do it roughly closer towards the end of the school year. We try to get the school year in. Like I said, hopefully things haven't persisted, for years that are making a facility audit tool, this year, or it's for, whatever that may be. We all know budgeting, and moving on. Next, discussion of middle school areas of concerns. In HVAC, this building is almost 4 years old. Again, what I did want to start with is, I believe we're in good shape. That off my experience, and I don't want to say anything else. Stuff what I've seen. We see in this building, rooftop units, we're approaching end of life. I'll probably say end of life a lot, I'm sorry. But that's just the, the go-to. Any vendor's gonna tell you end of life is, end of. But as we know, end of life is just a manufacturer's nation. Could it die 10 years in? Sure. Could it die 10 years, 3 days? Sure. Could it go 20 years? I've seen that. Could it go 30 years? I've seen that. Failed to mention on that, silly audit. We do include vendors as well. HVAC, there's quite a few rooftop units that are end of life. So yeah, it's a 4-year-old building. Some was made replaced 20 years ago. Some replaced. Concern for middle school. Well, here those built-in sections, I know there's additions in every building, so this building's pretty similar to that. Here we have a section, a mirror section, so we distinguish the two sections. There's concern that came out. Interior lighting, NPR. Interior lighting. A need for fixtures, but nothing that's, we're not talking about whole student restroom. A few places. Coming towards that point where it should be replaced. We have paving issues. Replacing tables and chairs in the NPR. As much, but kind of. Input is on that because rate they think is different perspective. The educators, I'm not an educator, so kind of. Interior doors in the old section as well, and cycle. Safety, I know elevators been a hot topic at middle school. Continue to be a hot topic. In the future. This is what we're picking up. It's not 100%, but it's a great list. And I know it doesn't cause me a lot.
So just a quick question.
Yeah.
It's a little more, you can notice it a little bit more, a smaller version, but is some like bolding of certain items. Are those items that are going to be, is that just a, that intentional, or is it, like to show the items that are being addressed maybe by the next budget that we're seeing, and other items like the HVAC items, and some of the others are waiting until later, or is that unintentional?
No, none of these were ordered by
Okay.
priority wise, just the
Okay.
formatting on.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Make it
Okay.
fit.
I tried to make it one.
It fits.
Yeah. I apologize if I'm being blurry.
No.
So this is the middle school.
Yeah, I'm interested in the methodology behind the tool that you use to arrive at a prioritization.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, that prioritization drives what you start budgeting for when.
Right.
And so, for example, safety might be more important than expected end of life as provided by the manufacturer. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I'm interested in seeing what those parameters that you're using to figure out the prioritization of an item.
Well, say you have a door that, hold out, it swells in the heat, and it doesn't close. That would never happen here if it did. That would be security risk. That would be a high priority. That'd be a 1. That'd be a 1 of safety. Depending on the age of the door, do we repair it? Do we replace it? There's stores that, 20 plus years old. That would be, a 1 to 2 in my mind for be like a 3. Minus under the 4 threshold that we throw it under the budget.
So in general,
Mhm.
it's a 1 to 4 scale on function and versus safety. And once you combine the two, the lowest items rise to the top
From the budget.
from priority,
Yeah.
prioritization. and
But what I
budget
was thinking of,
perspective.
for example, if you have a budget of $10 million, and that's 100%, and you got 6 parameters are using for the criteria, not all the parameters are the same weight. Some of them, each parameter can have a value of 1 to 5, but safety might be 30% of the total, vis-a-vis some other parameter that may be only 10%.
Right now, they're equally.
So you have to kind of come up with something like that to come up with a more realistic prioritization. Otherwise, it's just a guessing game. It's not really that accurate.
Well, it's, right now.
I'm just
no,
saying.
Yeah, right now, it's just, it looks like they're weighted equally.
Okay?
And I think for the purposes, so this, you started using this tool when, like 5?
Well, it looks like it was 2017. I mean, this is the
Yeah.
tool we've been, this is the
Yeah.
tool you've been using to develop our capital
For
improvement plan
many
for
years.
the last 5
Yeah.
to 7
Right.
years.
Right.
So,
Yep.
and that's what we've been going with. So,
Right.
and
Right.
the facility's the best.
Right, and I'm not sure we want to weight it more on this form, because once it gets to the budget process, there's also, a weighting there as well, because some things get cut and some things continue, and that's a subjective determination based on what Lance feels is the weighting of that particular item.
Yeah, like probably if we were looking at, like adding a next section of a roof to be done
Right.
and things like that, if we're in the middle of a 10-year plan or something.
Right.
To do that.
Absolutely, the phased things, we would have more weight than other things. And safety, of course, has a huge weight, depending on
Well,
what kind of safety.
I'm glad you're
issue.
using a tool and a process, but that doesn't suggest that you should stop thinking about maybe how to make it a little better all the time, right?
Oh, absolutely
So-
not. It's working for us, I
Yeah.
think. It's like, if it's not fixed, if it's not broken, don't fix it, you know?
Okay.
But I agree, we should always strive for improvements, and that's what we have Lance for. He will improve it as we go.
And like I said, this is like a tool that was, never come across my desk. Yep. Listen, we want to put that in. Roof slope, let's put this in. This organizes it. This gives us a criteria. Based off like my past, it was, you go out, you do a job, you do a work order. It's like, oh, you know what? The ceiling tile is in pieces. It's a crack and it's. But we can organize it, we can document it. It's actually a great tool.
And
It
provides
is-
uniformity across the
provides
district.
uniform-
Absolutely.
So was this a tool that was purchased from a vendor, or was that
No.
somebody that
No.
developed it, or whose idea
This
was
is
it?
an in-house.
In-house.
Was it you developed it, the
Yep.
tool? Okay.
So it's a great budgeting tool. And that's why I believe it was implemented, as a budgeting tool.
Absolutely.
Because prior to this, it would be, hey Kelly, we need $100,000 for a roof.
Right.
Well,
Mhm.
who makes us say that? So, I don't know.
Yeah,
This
For-
way, we can document, so this roof is 30 years old.
right.
And put it on the sheet. So it's a great tool to document.
And before this tool, you could end up with 50 things that need to go in the budget. And some of them are really important and some of them are not. So how do you determine what is the most important thing?
Right.
So that's how this came about, is too much information. Let's try to narrow it down to something reasonable.
And that's why we've seen. been on the budget as a
Yes.
potential item for ever
Yeah.
since I've been on the board.
Right,
Like,
many years.
We know, like,
On the radar, yes. And because of that, we have money set aside in the expendable trust to help with that expense when it.
I keep that, you know, the supervisor keeps that in their minds. I've dealt.
Throw it.
Why? I don't know. Yeah.
Update it.
We've been keeping track of,
Right.
you know, what's broken and how to fix it.
Yeah, you look at things like, say, for instance, the handrail. It's a handrail. It's not- You have to have a handrail. So that becomes a high priority, low cost, easy to maintain or easy to repair, place the handrail. And on the other hand, it's as important as an elevator. You have someone that's handicapped and they gotta get down the stairs, you got a problem with a handrail, you got a big problem. So I can see where there's a lot of subjectivity that goes into it. You have to have some objectivity so it elevates to a visibility. Then you gotta decide, well, we gotta get that handrail fixed tomorrow. You can't have someone falling down the stairs or whatever, that kind of thing.
Well, and that's why we choose to use functional condition as well as the safety concerns.
Yeah.
You know, those two in combination should give you the right number
Yeah.
to evaluate for the budget.
It's difficult, but.
You gotta start somewhere.
Yeah.
Right, it's a great place to start.
Yeah. So I have a few questions. Handrails, what's that referring to?
That is, it's not a safety issue per se, it's just to replace the windows right outside the central.
Outside this,
Yeah,
right
if
here
you,
on the,
you probably don't even see them,
You
you know.
bet.
but They're
But-
there.
okay,
Certain
so
things
to replace
pass through
those,
to
all right?
certain people, I mean,
Sure.
that's what we ask, you know, we got a lot of people involved in this.
Yep.
Certain things progress through that.
Yep.
So, you know,
Right.
passion.
So sprinkler system leaks, what sort of leaking are we talking about?
That's a backflow in the fire pump room, it's just a backflow.
Okay,
So it's not sprinkler leaks throughout the building.
Boiler, yeah.
what's,
That's isolated down to waste.
what's the issue with the interior lighting for the gym?
So those lamps and that NPR are just behemoths.
Uh-huh.
And there's no better way to describe it, they're suckers. More after this, but, you know, our grand vision is,
So is that more of an upgrade or is it more of a repair or both?
that's not good.
Okay.
And that's to save in the long run. because
Yep.
I don't-
Yep.
It's a way to repair worth it is
You said you were gonna get into this in a little more detail, but are there opportunities to do the LED, like replacements and make cost of that through credits on the bill, things like that?
But I think we're, at this point anyway, looking at more of a big picture overhaul of the building, and that would be a portion of that overhaul.
Okay, so is that, part of your initiative, like with the energy overview?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Yes, like right now, we're doing phase one of that with the HVAC units at the high
Yep.
school.
Okay,
And we haven't yet developed phase 2, 3, and 4, but
Right.
we're working with architects and
yes,
you know, we'll roll that out over the next, you know, couple of years.
Mhm.
Maybe I should put that slide.
Well, so
But
the,
the reason that those lights are on there is because they are sucking the energy, as Lance said, and so it's kind of like the elevator, they're on the watch, because at some point, these are old, they're gonna go out. So if we have to replace them, we'll replace them with LED lights. If we don't, they will likely wait for that bigger, phased-in approach to energy saving and renovating the building.
so kind of broad, there's a lot of things listed under HVAC. Are those things there due to aging maintenance issues or efficiency upgrades or a combination?
It is a combination.
Uh-huh.
You're gonna get conditioning issues in this building, 2-3 times in the last 3 weeks. And it's because those units. Way, we're gonna keep repairing it. Hopefully that one repair will get us through, but what are we doing about it? We're gonna.
Just kind of in my mind, when we're looking at these things, I kind of divide them into two categories of the things that are maintenance issues that are starting to get end of life, starting to have issues that are going to need to be replaced soon term, versus things that would be part of an efficiency upgrade project. I view that as being a kind of a separate thing, so that's why I'm kind of in my mind trying to divide these out a bit.
Okay, so let me explain it. Let me say it this way, Brian. Every issue not every issue, a lot of the HVAC stuff.
Yep.
If we did what we're doing at the high school, down here, we take care of all those issues.
Mhm.
That's what I was telling, Fleetwood members in the school, project is really helped us out. Yes, everything is on here, and it can't come off. We go that route. Great point. We see it the same way, but I wanted to capture it all.
Yep.
So that's the middle school. We see preliminary life. Wait, but, so we're grateful for that. Electrical, same thing, LED light. Exterior wall light, is always on top. Wall packs, timers, we've had issues in the past. Was brought up by, Mr. Gazon. So at this point, I said, Mr. Gazon, Mr. West are great. And security, go out in the back, student lot. Well, and rear entry security at this point is just re-entry doors.
Essentially, the doors are locked once starting from a certain point, right after the start of the school day.
The doors are locked.
So it's important to know.
Correct. It's a very long time, and goes here, $10,000 worth of stop it. Can't guarantee 100% guarantee you can stop it. Scenario we discussed is, around
Are you thinking of
right near the chin.
creating, are you thinking of creating similar to what you have in the front entrance where you'd have to buzz people in?
Yes.
People would need to be buzzed in from the out, from there, but students locked would be a buzz-in sort of system?
Mhm.
Okay, because we do have students who come in off that back lot
Yes.
after first period, and, so they would have to buzz in, and we'd have somebody monitoring that space.
We would have to make a hire, yes.
Okay.
There's multiple reasons.
I think there's recently there's the potential for some grant funding,
Sure.
depending on how balance goes.
And all you can do is present it to us, like, that's all you can do,
Mhm.
present
Right.
it to us, and it's the budcom can feedback, and the board can give you feedback, and then those are the things.
That's come up recently,
So how much training is there by the staff and to kind of periodically train different scenarios?
That-
on intruder and
Yeah.
Alice training.
Like,
Lance's,
Yeah,
Not my
that's,
purview.
yeah, so we're talking just
No, no,
about
but I
the
mean-
inside of the-
that's not Lance's.
I know it's not his area, but it's usually the systems that you end up implementing are there to support the training and what you're gonna, support your training to actually implement certain solutions to address certain problems. I mean, for example, I worked at Hanscom Air Force Base for many years, and we went through constant training of all sorts of things.
Yes.
Like checking IDs, access
So I'm not
control.
gonna go into specifics, but the point here is, if we, just focus on capabilities and budgeting and not forget about some resources for training and bringing people in for,
I agree.
to help us figure out best ways to handle things,
So we do
then,
go through
you know,
like
it's-
security audits.
it's not the best way to invest all the
Yes,
resources.
the Homeland's,
Yeah, Kelly's got it.
right.
They're directing his component of that overall security. It's not his security.
But we have her here too, so,
This is a component, well, yeah.
Right. Homeland Security, yeah, Homeland Security evaluates us every 3 years, so that helps us. I think this is even on their last assessment, the rear foyer. And we have, I think it's 8 or 9 drills that we are required to do by the DOE, various kinds, not just fire drills. And there are various kinds of security drills.
Implemented by the principal.
Right, implemented by the
Runs
principals,
us.
right.
right.
And our goal is to have 100% staff ICS trained. I don't know where that percentage stands right now, but it's significant. And we also have, in each building, all 3 districts have a building safety committee that is also part of the bigger health and safety committee that we involve the first responders in both towns to that meeting, and their building safety committees are connected into that as well. And we discuss many different security and scenario issues. And this November, we are having a guy from Homeland Security come down for training, tabletop training, involving all 3 districts with their building safety committees. And we'll be having an active shooter scenario to go through. So I believe, from my perspective, that we have a pretty extensive training.
I agree. Again. Extra security, it minimizes, students, just for their safety, to do something. Here, gives us a better chance. We're gonna overhaul the elevators in the drive. The school is 26 years old, approaching around that, so. School, which is great again, because they face it, they're taking a lot of the true documents out, and a lot of those are applied. Maybe as well as egress, I don't have egress in on there.
The
Really
property,
sorry,
coming
yes.
off of
Okay.
campus, right?
Yep. As well, a lot of doors with, front doors. So that's on that system. Building grounds, interior doors, same thing. There's always been a storage issue. And we're not pretty quickly. Sections we've been doing on the roof.
So, actually, before you move on, a couple of questions. The storage shed, so that's additional storage space for it? Okay, and the kitchen equipment and repairs, can you expand on that a little bit? So what sort of kitchen equipment we're talking about?
Well, it's mostly the serving line in the front there for the students. It's very old, and we're exploring, I mentioned this last meeting, that we are exploring doing some renovations to the kitchen, more in terms of, and the dishwasher that is ancient, we'll probably be replacing that. And there's a little, in the design, a snack area that will be more robust than it is now. It's not very useful. So those are the sort of things that we're looking at now. We're getting designs and we'll cost that out and hopefully we can start working on that, those
Okay. Great,
aspects.
thank you.
Not at this time. I think we're focused on the kitchen more.
I read in the minutes last month that part of this is, Peter minutes in the budget committee, is part of this is to deal with the fact that, the lines are long and they can't get
Yes.
through, so to try and make it so that the students can get their,
Yes.
they have a 22-minute lunch.
Right,
so-
we're trying to make that
right,
more
trying to make it
efficient,
so that
yeah.
they can actually eat
Yep.
really quick with a hot lunch
Yes.
line, that'd be great.
That's kind of important, yeah.
Especially on pizza
Hot
day.
meals are still hot.
Oh, yes.
Well, I mean, we all know that, but, that's just the history of all the people in high school, but yeah,
Right.
if we can get that line moving.
Yeah, we are trying to make the design better.
And so, love with this. So this is. These two, we're developing right now with what we, with architects. Base these off of what we've done in Brookline and Almas. Into, energy efficiency, environment, and the up. A lot. So, it's funny. It's this plan, with the architects, with the, incorporate, as we know, the cafeteria in high school is
Is the goal of that vision to have, and forward with this next budget cycle?
I would expect that we may have a phase, maybe not the big picture, or we may explore more with the board this year, and maybe that's more in FY '25.
Okay. Okay.
Because there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle, and we wanna make sure that we're doing it as thoughtfully as we can.
Right, and you have the experience of Hollis
Yes,
and how subsequent phases have worked after the
Yes,
initial, and then
right.
is Brookline's, is getting
yes,
underway.
we're doing all of that in Brookline as well,
And then
and,
we have the HVAC piece going
right,
on
and
at the high school.
yes, and we're working on phases in Brookline as well. We know enrollment is increasing, well, at least we're seeing it start to increase, so we're expecting that to come here, but obviously we
Right.
have some time, and
Mhm.
that's why we wanna make sure the plan is well thought out.
Building improvement plan, basically how we break, over 20 is the big one.
No, you're using ballpark estimates.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of those things get pushed to those years.
Right.
How many things will show up?
So in essence, you use the prioritization tool to come up with those, of all these items, to come up with those estimates.
For 2023, we did last year, correct?
So do you combine the 20, under 20K and the over 20K in the same analysis, or do you do them separately?
That's a good question, depending on what it may be. If it's an HVAC issue and it's a rooftop unit, that would be doing interior doors, and we're doing like a whole section of the building, that would be over 20K. So it depends. Yes, they are included in that, facility.
So one analysis with everything thrown in it, right, and segregating it? Okay.
Correct. But we hit that, we hit every category in that facility on it too. 'Cause I was- Oh, okay. So those are the two.
That's already been approved.
To pass it on to the voters.
You guys plan to refinance and then
So action to, redoing those interviews.
One final question for me. Those numbers that you showed for FY '24, for '25, for the totals, those are the numbers that you will ask the budget committee to plan for.
Well,
That's-
yes and no. I mean, this is what the facility audit tool is telling us.
Right.
Then we have budget sessions that start in July with the principals and the superintendent and the assistant superintendent, and it's very likely that many of those things that are on that the audit tool is giving us will be pushed to FY '25, some of them. And, no, with
So that's
should-
just an initial input to your deliberations, if you will.
It is like the starting point of the budget process, and I guarantee you that not everything will make it, so.
Not
At
everything
least
will-
this year.
Not everything will survive the 5 rounds of review, right?
Right, exactly, because we have our own number of rounds of review, and
Right.
then you guys get a
Right.
chance at it as well, so.
Then there's the unforeseeable.
Yes, oh, definitely, then there's that.
I tell you what it is, but it's
I
unforeseeable.
wish you could.
Trying to make it as foreseeable as possible.
Yes, we try,
Yeah,
we really do
exactly.
try. There's a lot of thought put into the budget process for maintenance, yes.
And what that enables us to say is just at a quick glance, okay, we're looking at, half a million dollars. So it just kind of gives you like a frame of reference, like
Mhm.
as the starting point.
Absolutely.
And then, to see how it all, as you said, pans out based on any number of assumptions and
Oh, yes.
changes to that.
Right, and sometimes we choose to push forward to another year maintenance items because there's an education item that is a real big priority, So the budget process is a juggling process, as you guys all know, so.
And I noticed like there was a $300,000 2 years from now in like a paving, high school paving.
Right.
Just a chunk
Yep,
put there, which alerts me as a board member, like, okay, so we've got some like serious paving things that we need to be aware of
Yep.
and be focused on. And then you
Right.
talk the 175 for re-entry security, which is something that we have to really talk about as boards and committees and, make sure that we're prioritizing those things. So that's, when I looked at this today, I was like, okay, what are those things that are really budget impacts?
right,
that we really pay
absolutely.
attention to
That's a
and
really good
worry
way to,
about?
yeah, that's a good way to look at it, too.
On
And-
egress, like we're looking at that, and we've been talking about egress
For a long time.
a lot of years, and we do have more than one way out, just so the public knows there is a
Yes,
second egress,
absolutely.
it's just a difficult challenge,
Mhm.
it's through a different area, and, it's not as easy to access, and it's
Right.
not something that, we don't have a second egress for traffic, if you
Right,
will.
right.
So it's not, but we do have all the safety we need to get a fire truck out or a
Right.
fire truck in. if we
Well,
need to.
and that was helped a great deal by what we did last summer, which was to pave around the school and make that wider.
Wider,
So
right.
now a fire truck could, maybe not really gracefully, but a
Right.
fire truck could get
Yeah,
around,
right.
and that helps our egress issue right there, so.
So I think this whole thing is very helpful for
Right.
those of us who are trying to make sure that we're not.
So we'd like everyone to look at it, yes.
Well, I think this tool and the approach that you implemented 5 to 6 years ago, I really do think from just a consistency standpoint, it's
Mhm.
really important that we have something like this because, everyone's obviously working to do their best, but I think it was more, we need to do this, but this is, it brings the consistency, it puts your focus on, same areas across the district, and what's an issue here isn't maybe an issue there, and that's fine. But I think it's important for just in managing
Yes,
our district specifically and way it's split among three districts, the SAU specifically, and then the districts themselves. It's different than, how other SAUs have to manage things, so I think this is really.
Not anywhere. Nice to have that I would like to have, and she said. I know not all this stuff. We have future team discussion days. Solution if enough problem going well. Will stay in all, minds, surrounding for it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I got a little lengthy.
No, no, no.
Is this your first presentation? This,
To this group, yes.
well, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. I think, we like to look at this, when this tool, when Kelly implemented this tool and we started kind of this process, this is a good time of year because the budgets have been passed and we're not into the next budget cycle, so it gives us an opportunity. Last month we talked about food service, this month we looked at the facilities and maintenance to just kind of address those topics that we wouldn't have time for, as the budget cycle, kicks in the fall and things like that, so it really does kind of help frame things and at least start, just, so that we have things in mind as we're, move forward with the budget process.
Is this going to come from the school board as well, presentation?
If you wanted to, I haven't ever done that, but we certainly can.
Tell them to watch this meeting too.
I'm available. I know what else to do.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
And Lance, you don't have to stay if you don't want to.
Yeah, you don't have to stay unless you want to. I shared with everyone the financial update and the link to the school board package. So Kelly, if you wouldn't mind bringing us through the results, as well as maybe talk a little bit about the maintenance trust, the public hearing that took place.
Oh, gosh, yes, if I can remember
It's
what
just-
we
and
approved.
it's really just reinforcing what we approved in the budget.
Right, it really
So-
is. I mean, everything that was approved in the maintenance trust there were no surprises on that. It's what we had presented at the annual meeting. I believe it was paving for the high school. It was the HVAC work for the middle school. And there was one other thing. Roof, the roof section. So, although the roof section is likely we'll probably do 2 of them next year because with the HVAC work going on,
That's true.
it's hard to combine those 2 things and make that work.
Right.
So
right.
we haven't pursued that roof project at this time yet, so. But as far as the financials go, I don't have a lot of news to provide you with tonight, but I can say that we've, especially special ed has released a great deal more in our encumbrances, so that has bumped our available balance up from, I forget what it was, like 800,000, now it's over $1 million. And that is completely attributable to students moving out and program changes. So they've had a year where there was a lot going on.
So that happened after 6/7?
No, that
That's
happened.
included in this 6/7?
Yes,
Okay.
it is included, yes. So between the last report, which I think was in April, and
And
this
this
one, there were a lot more encumbrances released. And we also continue to have openings, para openings and custodial openings. So that contributes to the available balance that we have. And then in addition to that, there was some additional revenue that came in. Medicaid, we have $40,000 that we weren't expecting, that is part of the overall balance that we see. So the revenue went up a little bit more, and that gives us a final, what we plan to, or what we are projecting to return to the taxpayers, comes in at $959,754. And that does include many things that the school board has blessed over the last couple of meetings, and some of those things are additional paving that we're going to do. For instance, I cannot talk today. The student dirt lot that's across from the baseball field there, we are going to put gravel on that and let it sit for a year and expand the use of it, and then we'll eventually be able to pave that and gain a lot of spaces. We're also going to, part of the budget is to create a parking lot for the turf field. And we're going to.
Oh, a separate part?
Yes, and then we're going to add to that with some of the FY22 money, so we get 50 spots out of that project instead of.
Oh, for the
It's
whole,
space
okay.
right behind, it's actually
Yeah.
right behind the current parking lot.
Yes,
Right, it's
right.
there.
Mhm.
Right.
We've parked, cars have parked on it as a grass lot,
Okay.
We just took that money out.
like during the vaccination
Yeah.
that they did.
Right, exactly. And then we're doing some other security things like cameras on that dirt lot and on the turf field parking that we're going to be creating. And we also have some, we're going to be investing in some additional interactive flat panels beyond what we're budgeting for in FY23. So all of those things are included into the number, the 959 number. So that is likely to potentially go up, but perhaps it will be somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay, so
And-
we're
and-
looking at just under $1 million.
Right now, yes.
And those are all approved by the school board?
Yes, they have their blessing.
And I
Yep.
also think we approved at the last meeting,
Oh,
up to
yes.
$85,000 for some lab equipment,
Right.
some science lab equipment that if we hadn't approved it, it would be a request for
For
budget,
budget.
so.
Right.
Um,
And that number is not in here, so that's an
So
additional
it's-
85, yeah.
Um,
And the equipment that we're replacing will come down to the middle school, so it's like some microscopes and some lab
Sure.
equipment that will come down to.
So that 85,000 will be subtracted from the 959,754.
Correct.
Right, but not, but you haven't finalized June yet.
Oh, heck
So-
no. So
so
it could be a
it
bigger
could
number
be-
than this, or it
right,
could be a smaller
it's
number,
gonna be
because,
within that-
yeah,
probably
the-
in that 900,000 to
right, there's a lot more reconciliation that we need to do, so.
or audit adjustments.
And audit adjustments, so, yeah, I would not say that is anywhere near the final number.
But at this point, we can safely say, the articles approved at the March meeting, like the maintenance trust, the special education trust, and fully funding the 1% retained fund balance.
Yes, those all will be funded, I am certain of that.
And this 959 is greater than the amount we were anticipating when the budget was put forward.
Yes,
So, 'cause
absolutely.
I think we kept it at 250, didn't we?
I think it was 2 or 300,000,
Yeah,
I
it
can't
was-
remember.
But it was significantly lower.
Yeah, significantly lower, and, special ed is the reason why, so I don't think anybody should.
Right, without that, we would have been in that.
Right,
$2,000
exactly,
range.
and, I think there's board members that definitely want special ed money to go back to the taxpayers as much as we possibly can, so.
Mhm. Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if anyone has
Not necessarily, but let me just quickly throw in a request.
Okay.
Could you find a couple of maps of the high school and the middle school and send them to us? Sometimes when we're discussing things, I have difficulty visualizing where it
sure.
is that we're talking about, and so having a reference
Are you
would be
talking about
handy.
like the outside view?
I'm talking
or-
about, the grounds areas,
The
yes,
gra-
the
okay.
outside mostly. Yeah,
I'm
more
sure
so
we
than the
have those,
interior.
yes.
That'd be great, thank you.
The meeting, there was quite a bit of discussion because, we really respect the fact that there's I think a substantial amount of money to go back to the taxpayers, and we want to return as much as possible. One of our members was, very, he just would like. He made the point, and I'm reading it from Cindy's email, so he made the point that taxpayers are very generous with us and vote to approve our budgets, and we include in that budget, obviously, everything that we need for our special ed students. And as Kelly and Linda will tell you that, one student moves out of district, one student's least restrictive environment becomes a little bit less restrictive, and we can see, money coming back to us, which is good, although I do want the public to understand that we're still providing excellent services to our special ed students. But in this case, we have $740,000 in special ed funds that we won't be spending this year, plus an additional, when we change somebody's placement, we might change their transportation need, and so we have $321,000 in transportation fees that we're not gonna need to cover this year. So it's almost $1 million, and so this, Tom was just very curious as to how we can make sure that money, like to see unencumbered funds from the special ed line items always be given back to the taxpayers or held in a format only to be used for special ed expenditures. And Andy explained to him that the really only way to do that would be to increase our cap on our special ed trust fund. And so we will have further conversation about that. I mean, we've made that cap 250. Some of us feel very comfortable with that cap because that really does cover an out-of-district placement. Unless we were to find that out-of-district
Right.
placements were 350 or 400, having that cap be set to cover an out-of-district placement makes a lot of sense for some of us. But Tom was suggesting that we might want to look at expanding that cap. So I just wanted you to be aware of that because those are conversations that will the future and warrants and articles on the warrant. So that's his intent, I believe. For me, as a board member, I keep the whole budget in mind and think, when we make those decisions as we're building the budget and we have special ed needs that we know, we may actually be taking away from some of our regular ed students as well when we're making those decisions and those compromises. So I just see it as like, it's a windfall, if you will. And so, giving it back to the taxpayers is certainly my goal, but taking some of the money, and actually, I don't think we're actually, because there's some other things, like we had about $40,000, at least at the last revenue expense report, that regular ed items makes sense to me as well. So I'm just kind of presenting to you the conversation that occurred, and not everyone was on the same page.
And I was gonna say too, some of those regular education items are items that special education students do benefit from as
Sure.
well. Because when we're talking about special education, we're not talking about only out-of-district placements. And the district is really, really hard to keep students in district and develop programs that enable, a lot of, using district facilities and things like that. So there is a real likelihood and probability that a lot of those regular education items do get used by special education students as well.
And to me, the most away from this conversation is the fact that the budget wasn't created with this cushion of money in mind. It was instead created to provide for what we knew we had at 18
At that
months ago
time,
when we were
yes.
looking at our
Absolutely.
student body. And so when we talk about this, it's really more to say, listen, we weren't trying to have this much money left over and give it back to you. We don't wanna play that game. We wanna provide for our students. And then if we have students who move out of district or things, and the absolute reverse could happen. We could
And
have
it has
students
happened.
who
It does.
Yes.
and we could have students who may have some sort of catastrophic thing happen. Lots of things happen to kids that are currently in our district that might need more services. And
Right.
so, or we could have a student move in. So we just have to make sure that we kind of are always paying attention to that. And that we just want the taxpayers to be aware of this is where this happened. And we have one member who wants to make sure that any time we have this kind of an overflow of special ed, that it gets reserved for special ed students. But not everyone on the board, I'm just explaining what the conversation was, and that we can expect to hear it in the future, and, not everyone was of the same mind.
And I would say, I mean, that 225, 230, 250, wherever we, like, I think we landed, at the maximum with this last
We
budget
did.
cycle for the co-op. I think any budget committee member sitting here would say, happy to have that discussion of increasing that cap if we do see things like out of district placements costing more, transportation costing more, all of those things. Happy to have that conversation. And it was a stake in the ground 5
Right.
years ago.
Right.
So, it's a valid conversation to have in any budget cycle, but another way to have another valid conversation during a budget cycle is to consider the use of the retained fund balance, because we do fund that at a level significantly below, the maximum allowed by statute. It would have to be a determination, by the legislative body, obviously, and through a warrant article or petition article that's brought forward through the budget cycle. So if you're looking to retain more funds in some way, that is not, since we don't have the contingency line in the budget, which is again another topic for the budget cycle, looking at that retained fund balance percentage is a valid conversation.
And that was
as
actually
well.
brought up at our meeting as well by the superintendent, that that's another potential place to, where it didn't give the budget committee more flexibility. Conversations to see what we want to put forth to the taxpayers next year. So.
No, I appreciate that, and it was something about you saying it too, because Cindy had sent me a note about her status for this evening. She did think she was gonna be able to be here, but some things changed at the last minute. And, in reading what she was saying, I do appreciate you putting it forward, because hearing it is a little bit different than reading it, and she did a great job with the explanation. It was honestly just my interpretation of something that was written, so.
And it's in the minutes as well.
Yeah.
So it's captured pretty well in the minutes. And whenever I talk about numbers, I stumble, so I try to.
You did great.
Kelly, would it be possible, because we brought up the subject now of the special education trust fund, and is the level that we're setting at appropriate? I'm thinking if we look back over like the last 5 years or something, and we looked at how much we budgeted versus how much was actually spent for each year and what those deltas were. I mean, the upside or the downside deltas of those would give us an idea of, okay, we're seeing some years where it's $100,000 to $200,000, or we're seeing some years where it's $400,000, $500,000. That kind of gives us really a better sense of how much buffer space we should have out there for those.
So that's in the budget trend file.
Yep. Okay, so we may already have
Yeah,
that
we do
then.
have that.
Okay,
If you
never mind.
open-
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
if you open all of those lines.
Yep.
It'll at least get us through, Y21 actuals.
Yep.
So it's not updated yet, it gets
Sure.
updated in the fall for the final actuals, but that can give you a sense
Okay.
of the trend of the
All right,
last few
but
years.
if we wanted to go back and reevaluate what that limit should be,
Yeah.
then that would say would be an important input for
Yeah,
that.
and looking at, I think that maybe looking at, over 5 years for maybe the top 5 placement areas where we place students to see how costs have changed over time. We not only, there are a lot of different costs that factor into an out-of-district placement, but,
Yeah.
something to that effect would be just kind of
That
interesting.
is the challenge. Each
It's so
case is
different,
special.
it's so different.
Special requirements, and you never
Yeah.
during the course of the school year.
Mm-hmm.
I think chairs around for that, because
Mhm.
that's a vote.
You know, it's very hard to see what the costs are when you have special needs. But we must know what an average is per student, just an average. And I know,
You know what
That-
you're saying, wouldn't that be nice?
yeah, well, you know,
Yeah.
you get someone that may require $200,000 and someone 20,000 because of whatever the situation is.
You may find a pool, like, we wouldn't be in this pool.
You could
And
do
Ken
it
will
that
always be in this pool.
Yeah.
You might have 1 or 5 that will cost you, you know, $2 a year.
Yeah.
Mm.
It could be half your budget on
Yeah.
4 students.
Mhm.
That's where we get hit, so.
Yeah.
The average number doesn't give us what you're looking for, which is the way you predict.
Maybe the
It's-
median.
It's
is
highly
better than the
variable.
average or something.
It's just-
But what I'm
Just
thinking
that
of is,
variability is so great.
I
if-
still think we're, I mean, this is, I think $950,000. I mean, this is like about, I think. It's really good to be coming out and there's the.
We've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I think it's great, I mean, you guys have done it really well, and it's a really good budget, and to come out at the end of the year and basically to look, and when you look at the specifics and you see that almost $1 million of that, then when we're adjourned, is from special ed, then it's like, well, yeah, that makes sense, it just makes sense, and it's clean and it's on there, but yes, Tony, if we could predict better, we would all be
we'll
fans,
get
but
one
the
of those
truth of the matter
balls
is
that you.
we can't, and this
No, but
isn't-
this,
isn't
I was
a
thinking
huge
there's gotta be a
district,
way to see
But it's such
the
a,
disparity in seeing where most of them fall and come up with a number, so we can fund it better in case we have that odd situation that happens.
but when you're looking
because
at $1
Tom's
million,
right.
yeah.
People wanna see something coming back, and they'll take an explanation.
Well,
If it's $1 million coming back and you can explain it
Right.
because of these unforeseeable situations, and we had
and
a
I
windfall.
think, and I think that the legislative body is over the years has become more understanding of those explanations, and they understand that special education does
Does.
swing, and, you know, we do, I think our student services, department does a fantastic job at managing everything that they need to manage, and you simply can't predict families that are gonna leave the district, you just don't know. So I
Right.
think, and I think when we've had those situations where we've had students come into the district and they manage within the budget that they have to make the adjustments, and it's one of the reasons why we have so many programs that we've moved in district, and we've, we have cargo vans so that we're not, your transportation vans, so that we're not using the bus services and things like that, we really have put a lot of effort, student services department has put a lot of effort into managing costs, so that, the swings are going to happen, and I've stood up at March meeting and said, this is, greater by 400,000, because the year before, we were under by 400,000, and students come in and students go out, and they really do, I can't say enough about, the amount of detail that needs to be managed on a case-by-case basis to work within the budget that they have is a significant effort, so.
And I just want to put this conversation in perspective. You mentioned Hollis and Brookline. They are in the opposite situation right now. Brookline is, I'm not sure, maybe we will be able to return a few dollars to the taxpayers this year, and it's only because we have para openings and custodial openings, or we would be dipping into the special ed traps.
Because during the planning, the budget cycle,
Yes,
there was the anticipation that Brookline was gonna need most of its trust.
absolutely.
So,
And just because of other circumstances, we've been able to get through that. And Hollis is in a similar situation. They had a lot of move-ins or changes in programming, and because of openings, we are not gonna have that problem, but they were facing a potential of using the trust as well.
And there's
So-
also something to consider as we move into the next budget cycle is a piece of legislation that changes the requirement of the district for how long we need to provide services.
Yes,
So it used to be up until the age of 21, until the student reaches their 21st year, but there's a piece of legislation that now means it's to the last day of, like, through, until you get to the
Like your
22nd
22nd
year,
birthday.
yeah.
right.
So, it's, again, it impacts the population, and we have to, go in and evaluate, maybe when we thought we would be rolling certain services off, we need to maintain them due to changes in
Exactly.
legislation,
Yeah.
so. Right.
These children need these services, and we can predict the cost.
Mm-hmm.
It's the wild cards that we just.
Exactly,
Right.
the move-ins and outs,
We
yeah.
also keep in mind that there are students who experience things over the course of their life, and that
Yes.
could change their status.
Yes.
So, that's an important piece. And then the other thing I just want to point out is, you're mentioning that there's positions that are not being filled, which are saving us funds, great, sure. But it's overstressing our
Yes,
current staff.
it absolutely
So
is.
we can't fill those positions, maybe because who knows why they're not being filled, obviously, there's a lot of things going on, but that's an important piece to this whole
Yes.
thing. So we might be saving some money, but we've got a lot more.
There's a
stressed out
cost,
people.
yeah.
So,
Interesting topic.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else from the board meeting, Holly? We graduated another outstanding class.
we did, we had a
And
great graduation, and it was phenomenal to see. Basically 100% back to a normal graduation with no spacing, and, we just we did have some students in masks, but much fewer masks, and our new principal spoke, and I think it went really well. We had a great year. I think it's been an incredibly stressful year, and I think
Mhm.
what we're hearing from staff and from administration is that this year in many ways was harder than the last one. Students are learning, many of our students in the younger grades are learning how to be back in buildings,
Mhm.
and that figure that all out, plus our high schoolers and the stresses of that. So, a lot of stress and anxiety in the buildings. And managing that is what's really.
just as an aside at this point in the hiring process, are we seeing our openings, like replacements of retirees and things like that? Are we seeing good positive?
Yeah, we definitely are. We're hiring,
process?
as far as I know, there's still a few positions open, but as far as the teaching staff goes, that doesn't seem to be as hard to fill. It's the para staff, and Lance can speak to you about his custodial staff. Those remain very difficult to fill right now.
At least at the high school.
Yeah, the high school, I think, is in good positions. The elementaries still have some, I think, that are open. No, I just want to give some kudos to Lance. Because of him being here, we are able to cover buildings. I mean, we have a total of 3 custodians in RMMS, and we lost 2 of them. So that was a hit, and he was able to, because of his excellent management skills, grab some of the people in the middle school, in fact, to go over there on a regular basis and chip in and help. And reports from the principal there are, this building has never been cleaner. So those efforts, right, because we have people that are willing to step up. Obviously, they're being paid, but they don't have to go there, So he's done that in other buildings as well. So another testimony for why we need a facilities director, and it just came true again.
Well,
Side yard.
seeing no other questions, I just want to go back to the only thing I our appointment of a meeting observer, I ran right over, but that was you, Tom, so I'll be looking with you in a few minutes to put your little summary together. But the other outstanding item from the beginning of the meeting was the approval of the May minutes, so I shared with everyone the draft that had Raul's comments included, so I'll take a motion to approve the amended minutes from the May meeting. From
I'll make
Tony.
it.
Seconded by
amended
Raul.
minute. Yeah.
Okay, great. Any comments or questions?
Nope, I'm going to abstain since I wasn't here.
Okay, so all those in favor of the amended minutes? 401. Okay, from announcements, we were talking a little bit before the meeting, we are off for the summer now, and we'll reconvene on August 25th. That's right before the start of the school year, when is this, I don't know when
I'll
this
do
will
your
be.
first.
Okay.
I don't quote me.
Okay, and at that meeting, I shared with everybody the audit from the last audit cycle, and our auditor will be here at that meeting on the 25th, so please come up with some questions and reviewed the audit before that meeting. He does a really nice overview, and we like to get like right to that at the beginning of the meeting so that he can be honest. A couple of other agenda topics, we'll see maybe where the financials sit at that point, although I don't think we finalized it really
No,
until
because
September.
the field work is just over.
Yeah, you'll just
yeah.
finish the
Right.
current audit, so.
So September is more likely.
Maybe spend some time, looking at the Department of Ed website, and looking at some of the reports and information that's available there, just kind of for our own use purposes. I'm happy to take over the summer. Any other topics or ideas people have from an agenda building perspective? Anything they want to hear? If you think you want to, I don't know if we've done a student services overview in a while.
That's probably a good idea.
It might be a good
Okay.
fall
I will.
to look at that.
We should have a discussion on what they're seeing in terms of enrollment increases. I think that's kind of a normal topic, but
Yeah.
in particular, this is kind of a weird one from the last few years for it, so it may take a little bit more discussion.
And you know what, we can probably do legislative, like, routine, Mr. Process Observer.
Very informative and good overall, excellent job. Any questions, you staying on topic?
Take a motion to adjourn at 8:13 PM.
So moved?
Brian, seconded by Raul. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Happy 4th of July, happy summer, everyone.
Thank you.
I know, I know what to do on the adjournment.